think maybe you do both. I think you might want to listen. There's nothing wrong with listening. If somebody called from a country, Norway, we have information on your opponent. Oh, I think I'd want to hear it.
You want that kind of interference in our elections?
It's not an interference. They have information. I think I'd take it.
Trump welcoming the potential crime of collusion and echoing his son Donald Trump Jr.'s actual response, of course, to that infamous email from a Russian intermediary, promised the dirt. He said, "I love it." Team Trump's story was, of course, that Don Jr. was just a good kid and didn't know the rules. This was a sort of a clueless defense. In Mueller's report, we learned the government would have a concern about whether they could prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the people at that famous Trump Tower meeting had the kind of knowledge that their conduct was unlawful. That is a fair or even charitable reading of their clueless defense. But will it work now? Because if you haven't been watching the news, and I think you are watching the news, you know that everyone has heard about the fact that you can't take these things of value. It's illegal. We were just talking about it at the top of the show. The president knows that. Attorney General Barr last month. Take a look.
What if a foreign adversary, let's now say North Korea, offers a presidential candidate dirt on a competitor in 2020? Do you agree with me the campaign should immediately contact the FBI? If a foreign intelligence service, a representative of a foreign government says, we have dirt on your opponent, should they say, I love it, let's meet, or should they contact the FBI?
If a foreign intelligence service does, yes.
Yes, that's Donald Trump's attorney general. We know that Donald Trump knows about this because in this interview that's giving him so much heartburn, he made a point to say he would also overrule his own FBI director.
If any public official or member of any campaign is contacted by any nation state or anybody acting on behalf of a nation state about influencing or interfering with our election, then that's something that the FBI would want to know about.
Let me call the FBI. Give me a break. Life doesn't work that way.
The FBI director says that's what should happen.
The FBI director is wrong.
The FBI director is right. And not only is this well understood federal law, there's even precedent for how it would go down. You may have heard about this. It's pretty interesting. Take a look at what happened in the 2000 election.
Former Congressman Tom Downey, who prepares the vice president for debates, received a package of materials Wednesday containing notes and a videotape. Gore advisors say Downey, realizing he shouldn't have the material, immediately turned it over to his lawyer, who in turn passed it on to the FBI.
Former Congressman Downey is here to discuss this exclusively. And we'll give you a little more context. The Gore campaign, of course, was not the victor after the Supreme Court resolved one of the closest U.S. elections in history. But Downey says he was, of course, doing what he understood to be the lawful requirement and the right thing, telling the FBI about the material he received, thinking that, yes, it could even be part of a crime. This is a point that Speaker Pelosi herself raised just today.
This isn't even foreign governments. This isn't even foreign governments. That's what you do. There is a sense of decency about fruit from the forbidden tree, ill-gotten gain.
Former Congressman and Al Gore advisor Tom Downey is here with me now exclusively. Thanks for coming on The Beat about this.
My pleasure.
You are now a fascinating footnote, newly unearthed in the news on this story. You've done many things in your life, but on this story, walk us through why you made that decision, how quickly you called the FBI, and what you think watching all this.
Well, the fact is, it was quite clear to me when I saw the debate materials and the video that this was Bush campaign material that I should not have. And I called my lawyer. We talked about what we were going to do with it. We turned it over immediately. He eventually turned it over to the FBI. They came and interviewed me that day. And the curious thing about it was I had to explain what the crime was to the FBI agent. But the fact is that...
But just on that point, they came out and saw you how soon?
That afternoon.
Same day?
For 4 hours.
So your reaction as a campaign operative was, this might be criminal because it could be stolen at a minimum to help another side, and you call the authorities, and their reaction is, this is important, they come out same day.
Correct. And not only that, but Louis Freeh, who was the director of the FBI at the time, became the agent of record.
Huh. So then what?
Well, not only did I have to turn it over, but then I had to recuse myself from any further campaign activity. It was clear to me that no one would believe that I hadn't read the material or watched the video. So to make sure that we made a clean break of this so that there could be a free and fair and honest debate, I didn't participate in the campaign after that.
Let's take a look at that, actually, because we read what you said at the time. People are cynical about the political process. I happen to believe it is a noble and honorable profession. But if the American people are to believe that, we must act honorably. And that is what I've tried to do here. So to put you in the strike zone, middle of the plate, ball down the field question, how does what you did in that moment differ from what the president says he wants in 2020?
Yeah, well, the president is playing by a different set of baseball rules. Under the president's, if he were pitching and he hit you, you'd be out. The fact is that that's not how we play baseball, and that's not how a president should govern. The fact is, as the commander-in-chief, he should set an example, not be prepared to win at any cost, allow foreign entities to influence a campaign. It's shocking, as your Steve Israel said in the earlier segment. The fact is it's both illegal and immoral.
You put it so starkly. Let's listen to the other time this came up when Jared Kushner struggled with a very similar question about what you just said was a moral obligation as well as a legal one. Take a look.
My question to you is, why didn't you pick up the phone and call the FBI? It was an email that said Russia, that said the Russian government was trying to help. Like, why didn't you do that?
Jonathan, we're in a place now where people are playing Monday morning quarterback and they're being so self-righteous. Had there been something that actually was nefarious at that meeting that came up, maybe we would have done something different. But the reality is that the meeting was a total waste of time.
Would you call the FBI if it happened again?
I don't know. It's hard to do hypotheticals, but the reality is that we were not given anything that was salacious.
I don't know how hard the hypotheticals are. He went to a pretty good law school, so he's done some hypotheticals before. When you see that, when you see the president's comments, do you think at a certain point this is not just ignorance or willful blindness, but something more sinister, or are you not prepared to go that far?
Well, in the president's case, I think Speaker Pelosi said today that he really doesn't have the capacity to understand right and wrong, and I believe that's true. In Jared Kushner's case, the idea that your naivete would allow you to ignore what is law and precedent. I mean, anytime you take an important meeting in a campaign, there are lawyers there to explain to you what's legal and what isn't. Either they didn't avail themselves of that talent or they ignored it. And in either case, it's unacceptable behavior.
And these are folks who've worked with a lot of lawyers. I mean, Trump is nothing if not known for litigation, most litigious candidate in American history. Kushner, as I mentioned, is a lawyer himself. Congressman, having lived through this in a eerie, echo of some of this, as the president says, well, that's not how it works. You showed through your actions how you think it should work, and we appreciate you telling the story here and newly relevant tonight. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.